All right. Hello and welcome to Coronacast, episode number 2. As you can tell, I am in a different room than last time. That is because the last 3 days I decided to drive back to Denver. Actually, after the first episode I recorded, I was just thinking to myself that night, Sunday night, of just, if worst case scenario happens, where do I want to be? And for me, it was an easy answer after I asked myself that question. It was to be in Denver, and rather than Tampa. Most of my family's in Denver, and I just felt like if worst case scenario happens, it'd be easier for me to reset and not be anxious in Denver rather than Tampa. Yeah, I left Tampa with a heavy heart. There's a chance, and I hope it's not true, but there's a chance that the only time I go back to Tampa is to collect the rest of my clothes and stuff in my apartment. We'll see how long that goes. The Lightning right now are going to try to go back to work on the 30th or the April 1st. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we shall see. So excuse the decor right now. I just tossed something up. Unfortunately, one of the things I didn't think about with coming home was the turf wars that were going to happen between me and my two sisters who just came home from college as well. My one sister, Abby, has, I guess, decided to take 5 of the 7 available desks in the house, 5 of the 6, I should say. So every desk I try to go to, she says, no, that's my art desk, or no, that's my writing desk. No, that's my studying desk. I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? So right now, I just put up a picture of a horse and said, you know what, the people are more important than the studio. So I will probably be in a multitude of different places over the next couple days. I'm hoping to create a actual studio in the extra room we have downstairs. So hopefully it'll be coming in the next couple days. But like I said, I got down into Denver about last night, and have just been trying to get into work and get in the groove of things right now. So that was my decision to go home. I hope things turn for the better, but I just haven't seen much in the last 4 days that would put me there. So as of right now, as of recording, I just checked the stats on Johns Hopkins. I just wanted to let you know. So Thursday, March 19th, here's where we stand. We have 236,278 people infected worldwide, and we have 10,666 infected in the U.S., that is up from about 1,000 when we recorded on Sunday. So as I said, once we start testing, the infection rates are going to go up. This one's going to be a little bit shorter than the first one. I do want to do some quick housekeeping before I move into anything else. The first thing I want to say is that interviews are coming. As I said, the last 3 days I drove 30 hours from Tampa to Denver, so I didn't have much time to really schedule any interviews or anything like that. I just wanted to hop on here to put some stuff out here. I had a lot of time to think, so I've got some thoughts that I want to get into a little bit later on. Interviews are coming. I've reached out to about 10 people right now. We're trying to schedule different stuff. Hopefully I record one tomorrow or Saturday, but look for those coming up really quickly. And then also another thing, obviously right now, the first 2 episodes are just on YouTube. But those will be put on the iTunes store and other distributions, not iTunes store, the podcast store and other distribution outlets, maybe Stitcher, potentially SoundCloud, different areas. I do want to get this out on as many platforms as possible just so we can increase the audience. And the first thing I want to say is just thank you to everybody who watched the first episode. I was shooting for 100 views. I thought if we get 100 views, I'll be super happy. We got up to 157, so that exceeded my expectations. I got a lot of really positive comments and things like that. And I was really happy. And like I said, this is just for me to clarify my thoughts. And so I'm glad that you guys were able to get some stuff out of it. I promise the set will be better next time. I just wanted to hop on here real quick. So the first thing I want to talk about is obviously I was driving the past 4 days. So my time on Twitter, my time on some of the other sources I've been using was a little bit more limited. So I was able to think of some more kind of rhetorical questions that I want to ask you guys as the audience. Because one of the things I put in some time of like, what's the mission of this podcast going to be? What's the mission of this series going to be? And I think one of the things that I really want it to be is, while I'm not an unbiased source, and you shouldn't think that I'm an unbiased source, I am trying to put as much information out there and give you the opportunity to marinate in it and then just see like what's your decision from it? So I'm going to have some more sources as far as like articles that I'm drawing from, different things like that. And so what I want to have is like the most well-rounded, informed audience out there, and just give you as much information from multiple angles as possible. And so, you could be seeing stuff that was reported from a right-wing source. You could be seeing stuff that was reported from a left-wing source. I want to bring it all into the discussion. That way you guys can have the best information possible. Another thing, too, is I want us to be the most prepared group of people that we can possibly be, especially for post-virus and what that world might look like. And obviously none of us really know where we're going to be at that point, but I want us to start asking ourselves some questions about how can we recession-proof ourselves? How can we get involved in the communities? What are different things that we can do to make sure that we are ready for what the world looks like post-coronavirus? Because we don't even know what that looks like right now. Something that I want to bring up to you guys is I just read a report today from the Imperial College of the UK, which said social distancing and these sorts of measures might have to be in effect for 12 to 18 months, depending on the severity of what happens over the next couple weeks. That's one of the things that a lot of people have talked about, is that this could die down in the summer and then come back with a vengeance in the fall. And so, are we ready for a world that could be 12 to 18 months of, a trickle economy or a slowed down economy? Like, we could ramp back up in the summer, but then if we see another round of it in the fall where a vaccine may not even be ready, what does that world look like? So go check out that report if you want. That was interesting. That was one of the longer time frames I had seen. So go check that out. So some of the thoughts about the 4-day update that I just want to give you, and reminder, I just don't have as much information as I normally would just because I was driving so much. But one of the things I did notice was just on my general social media feeds, which I'll drop those social medias up right there again, so go follow me if you want. My Twitter's been kind of funny recently, but not great, so I'll be back on that a little bit harder as we get going. But one of the things I've noticed from my social media feeds is just how many people have been asleep at the wheel. And by that I mean just how many people have completely basked in the comfort of the modern world and just didn't even realize that something like this was possible. I've been very lucky in that one of my passions is history, and so I've been able to see, like, we're just living through a historical moment. Like, this is one of the things that, like, we're constantly at war with nature. We're constantly at war with, invisible things that are always going on. I mean, like the Spanish flu of the 1920s, go check that out. That was things that, like, people didn't predict coming, but it's just a part of history. And so I think it's really been surprising how many people have been, I use the term asleep at the wheel. I mean, maybe that's not the best term. Maybe you have something better, but just the amount of people that didn't realize anything like this could happen, it's higher than 50%, at least on my social media feeds. And so, we're going to be a group of people on this. And part of the reason that you're watching this is because you know what's going on and you know what's happening. So I'm not really even talking to anybody that is probably watching this, but I'm sure you all saw some people this week who were out partying on Friday and Saturday for St. Patrick's Day, and then have posted something on their social media feeds about social distancing this week. And it's just, for me, like, okay, yes, that's a good start. Like, they're getting the word out, but still, it's like, this thing hit last Wednesday. We should have, you should have not gone out this past weekend. And I'm not really like, trying to make a moral argument or anything like that, because God knows I don't have that, I can't stand on that ground, and no one else should. But I'm just saying, like, the people who've gotten lost in the comforts of modernity, not realizing that something like this could happen, hopefully that's something that will wake people up, and that we can kind of, be a more active and more proactive generation coming on. I think that would be one thing that a lot of people would say, is that Generation Z or generation or the millennials were just kind of, raised in the era of social media and the era of modern comforts, and that things like this were not really a possibility. And even, for what happened in 2008, that was more of a systematic collapse versus like an actual pandemic or something like caused by nature. And so, the amount of people who just didn't really see this coming was kind of, I think I knew, but, I'm sure you all saw somebody like that. So that was one thing that I just kind of noticed the past couple of days. One thing too, cities have been shutting down the last 4 days. San Francisco, I just talked to a friend from San Fran today, and, nothing's open right now. My friend in New York, nothing's open right now. They've got the shelter in place warning. So I said that this stuff was coming, and, right now I think, like, where this idea of we're going to shelter in place for 2 weeks and then come back outside is coming from. Like, I got an email from my gym today that said we're closing down for the time being, but we're going to open back up on April 1st. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, that just doesn't seem possible to me, especially as we are just entering this and we're just having hospital shortages and we're just haven't even really hit the we haven't even really summited where we're going at this point. So, I think be ready for 6 to 8 weeks of this and maybe 4 on the low end and then potentially early summer on the long end. So just, realize that we're in this for the long haul. So make sure you're ready to go. Make sure you've got food. Make sure you stay sane. Have the food that you don't touch. Like keep a reserve. Like I know some people are probably already digging into, some of those supplies and things like that they might have bought a week or 2 weeks ago. But like have a portion of your food that you've set aside so that way, like 2 months from now, if we have a complete economic slowdown, are we going to, the supply chains are going to be disrupted. Like make sure you've got food in case the grocery stores can't stock up or in case we have to ration food, different things like that. And then another thing that I wanted to talk about is as cities have shut down, help the caretakers. Like I need to do some more research. I'm sorry I haven't done that so far, but like who are we going to donate to? Like where should we be putting our money as, bystanders inside our homes so we can help these people from the hospitals? I mean, you keep listening to all these different reports. They're running out of masks already in New York. They're running out of ventilators already. Like, like telling nurses and stuff to reuse masks. Is that something that, like is going to have to happen? So one development early this morning is that Elon Musk has said that he's going to start working on building ventilators. That's a really good thing. So hopefully, we get this kind of public-private partnership that steps away from the federal government, which has been, even potentially more incompetent than it was when we talked on Sunday. So, let's figure out how we can help these caretakers. And then the last point I have on the 4-day update is just, the economy is still in a downfall and there's so many shocks to the system right now. Like people aren't even really talking about the oil price gouging that's been happening between Russia and Saudi Arabia. And that's part of the reason oil is so cheap. But like, that's also another external shock to the system beyond coronavirus. So my faith in how if things are going to get better from where we talked on Sunday has not really improved. And so, just continue watching the economy, continue realizing that we're in for some tough times. I mean, driving across the country, I stopped in a lot of, lower income places, especially in the middle of the country, Kansas, Missouri, Tennessee, just some areas that are like, very rural, very outside of cities. And I just, it made me sad because I think a lot of people, they don't have the education. I'm so lucky that I have a job where I can work from home. I'm so lucky that I have an education that will help me get a job in a recession economy. Like I'm so lucky to have these things, but think about these people that don't have the ability to work from home. They have to go into work. What happens when those stores and things shut down? Like it just made me really sad of like, we're in for a really long haul here. And, I said like every week that is added on, it's going to add another month to a recession. Like it could even be longer at this point. And so, I know that everybody's kind of preaching like humanity first, but that's so important at this point. And just, be ready for, there's going to be social discontent coming. And I hope that I'm wrong. I really do. Like everything that I'm saying right now, I hope that I'm wrong, but these are somewhat of my predictions. Obviously you can say I'm biased one way or the other. That's totally up to you. Totally fine. Like I said, talk to me about that. Like, please talk to me about that. I want to get as many opinions and as many ideas as I can. So, it made me sad driving across the country. Like these people were hit so hard 10 years ago or 12 years ago now. And, they're in for it again. And so, it's a tough road ahead. So that's what I have on the 4-day update. So what I did a lot driving across the country, obviously 30 hours to myself is quite a long time. That last hour was rough. My mom called when I was about 90 minutes out and I like told her I can't talk right now. Basically yelled at her. It was like, I can't do it right now. I was just not in the mood to talk to anybody. So let me tell you, Kansas, when they build a McDonald's in the middle of the highway, it's a desolate area. So I know some great people from Kansas, but that's one of the brutalest drives in the country, I think. So a couple things that I thought about, and the biggest thing to me is, especially is like, I have a sister that's graduating from Calvin College wearing the shirt. I don't know if you can see it with the microphone, but she's supposed to graduate from Calvin this semester. And like that graduation's not going to happen. The rest of her semester is not going to happen. And one of the things is like, as sad and as disappointing as that is realize that nothing in our life, nothing in the world is set in stone. Nothing is static. everything is fluctuating, everything is changing. These institutions that we've built, these degrees that we have, these jobs that we have, they're not written in nature that this is the way that it has to be and the way that it's going to be. And so, take a look at history, the versions of government, the versions of jobs, the versions of things that we've had constantly changing, constantly flexing. It's a back and forth. It's a struggle between different groups of people. It's a struggle between civilizations. It's, nothing that we have right now is static. And, these degrees that we have, like I think about myself graduating with an MBA in May, like that's a really important degree in our society, but because we valued it that way, we've set up our society to value MBAs and value college degrees in a certain way. But that's not static. That's not set in stone. That's not something that can't be changed. So think about those sorts of things. Like everything that we have, nothing is written in nature. Everything has been kind of made up and thought and written in a way that best suits our society, or we best think suits us as a group of people. But remember, like none of that is set in stone. And I think that's kind of scary for some people to think about, of like, oh, we could lose these institutions of higher education. We could lose these institutions of media, of any of these institutions that you want to talk about, the way our government is right now. And that's scary because, yes, that is the transformation of a society and a transformation of a civilization. And, it is scary. And like it does, when just things like this are disrupted in nature, it's, usually has violence in it. But remember, that doesn't mean things can't get better. And I think like something I'm thinking about is like, if we're going to, let's start, maybe we should start questioning what those things hold in our lives, what these degrees, what these jobs, what these institutions, what the values of this society hold in our lives, and that none of them are static and none of them can't be changed. And so, we have a chance, especially on the reset that could be coming in the next couple of months. We have a reset point that we can talk about, like, hey, let's figure out what we actually value, what's important, and I think too, a lot of people are waking up and saying like, hey, for me personally, it was the family thing of it. That was like, I have so much family back in Denver, and I'm not saying any of my family's going to get sick. I'm not saying any of my family's going to die, but when you realize like at this moment that is a possibility, like that became the biggest value in my life, my job, my potential future in Tampa, like those things, while I love them and I want to have them, it doesn't supersede my value of my family in my life. And so, just remember, these things are not static, and they're fluid, and things can change and move. And so let's think about that as a positive for what we move on past after this. A couple of rhetorical questions, because I think, what I want, like for me, these are things that I'm thinking about so that I can prepare for what's coming next. And I think these are some things that, hey, if you got some time, obviously all we got is time right now. Like think about some of these things. This one is going to be more on a societal level. Is there going to be a move back to smaller communities? Are we going to see people move out of the cities? Over the last 10, 20 years, we've seen people flood into cities because they're hipper, they're cooler, there's more stuff to do. But, as people kind of, self-isolate right now and isolate in smaller groups, like, are we going to see the rise of smaller communities? Are we going to see more rural people right now? Like, are there going to be more, is there going to be a mega influence of smaller, 50 to 10, 100,000 to, 150,000 cities? What's going to be the role of smaller communities in our lives? Because I think right now, like one of the things we talk about is, this is the loneliest time it's ever been to be alive. That's just, there's so many studies out there that can prove that and say those things. Like, even though we're more connected via our phones, we are very isolated. And so, let's move back to smaller communities. Let's do things that reinforce who we are as people and get us, in smaller groups. And I think that's, we see a rise of, radical groups a lot of times because these people don't fit in anywhere else in society. And in some ways we've made it that way. And so, the more small groups that we have, the more places that people can fit in, the less chance there is for these radical groups to rise. Another thing that I thought about, and I don't even know if it's a question at this point, the rise of nationalism. We've seen that since 2016. You take a look at Brexit, you take a look at the election of Donald Trump, like globalization has had so many positive effects on the world, but it's also hurt so many people in many different ways. I think like, jobs going overseas, different things like that. I think we're going to see a rise in nationalism again. I think we're going to see a decline in globalism. We realize that our global supply chains at this point, especially in America, our global supply chains have hurt us because of some of our dependence. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. I'm not saying like these global supply chains have helped create a standard of living that is better than anywhere else in the world. But I'm just predicting here that we could see a rise and a decrease in the amount of globalism we have and the rise in nationalism. Also, too, you follow anything that's going on in the federal government right now, politics is going to change a lot. I think, we're pretty much set for some sort of Medicare for all. We're set for potentially some sort of universal basic income after this. So keep an eye on like where that goes. And I think right now, you see the rot and the, incompetence of both major parties in this country. And so are we going to see a rise of bigger countries? Are we going to, or bigger political parties or more political parties? Sorry, my wording's all different, but are we going to see more political parties like Andrew Yang and the UBI group? Like, I think Andrew Yang should really consider running as a independent right now. I think his message and, compared to what Biden and Trump are going to offer, like he's someone that could be really popular if he ran as an independent or started his own party. So think about like, none of these things like Democrats and Republicans, they're not static in our society. These things are fluid. They can change. They go back and forth. And just remember that, especially like as we move past the virus and we move into economic recovery, like we have the ability to change that with the way we think about things. So now let's talk about my last part here is going to be, let's talk about what we're going to do personally, or what I'm going to do personally. Biggest one, what am I going to do to stay sane during the quarantine? Luckily, Colorado, where I'm home right now, gave us a good reason to stay inside, as there's 8 inches of snow outside. But what about when the sun comes up and it's early, middle of the spring and beautiful days, but nothing's open? Like, what are you going to do to stay sane at that point? I mean, there's only so much, yoga and working from home and different things like that that we can do to stay sane. And I think, this is a really good time for me, and not that any of you have to do it, but I think some things that I'm going to do is like really evaluate different decisions that I've made in my life, really evaluate different ways that I think about things. Like, if I'm completely wrong about everything that happens, everything that I've talked about, I'm going to have to talk to myself and I'm going to have to evaluate the way I've thought about this process, the reason my anxiety was so high, the reason that I had such a bad feeling in my gut and that my intuition, drove me into these decisions and these thoughts. Like those are like, that's a possibility that could potentially happen. And those are things that I'm going to have to address with myself. And so, I think I'm going to take a lot of time to like kind of explore some things and some events that are reoccurring in my thought processes that, are definitely weighing me down, and just work through them. I think like for me, I have a journal, and that's been the most important thing I have. I've journaled for about 3 years now, and it's so interesting to see like the changes in my thought process, but also how my thought process this year or this day is the same as it was 3 years ago. I think like, so start journaling, start doing things to like really learn who you are as a person, because that's what this time is about. And I think for me, I've been self-isolating most of my life, but like figuring out who I was, especially after I got sick, and had to spend all that time by myself, like figuring out who I was has then changed the trajectory of my life. And I think, I know a lot of people who are incredible people, but they don't know themselves. So they're kind of holding themselves back. So like, that's something I'm really going to focus on during this quarantine time. The next thing that I really want to talk about, something that I'm trying to think about, is what skills am I going to learn that will be handy in a recession economy? My next door neighbor, the great Bill Burgert, who is, he's a mechanic, he's a welder, he's got all of these skills that give him kind of recession-proof jobs. And so what kind of skills am I going to learn to give myself a recession-proof job? Because I hope it's not that bad. I hope the recession is kind of short-term, but this recession could be really deep, and it could be, as Steve Mnuchin said on Wednesday, the Secretary of the Treasury, he said there could be a 20% unemployment rate if we don't intervene and give people some sort of help. And so, what sort of things am I going to learn to give myself skills that I can find a recession-proof job? Another one for me is, how am I going to engage with my community, and how am I going to engage with my community on a small scale? Not, obviously this podcasting is engaging with the community, but it's a virtual wide range community. I mean, there's people who are going to listen in Colorado, there's people who are going to listen in Florida, potentially around the world. Like, that's not a small community. That's, even though it's only 157 views, it's still a very broad and wide ranging community. So what am I going to do to engage with my neighbors? What am I going to do engage with people in South Denver, different things like that? Because I really do believe that no matter what happens, we're going to see a rise in community engagement, and potentially a rise in like strengthening of city governments and state governments, where, the people in Denver, to be honest, are completely different than the people in Tampa. I mean, they have some of the same values, but genuinely, like, just this country is huge. And so the vibes of what you get on the West Coast and East Coast are different. And so, maybe we realize, like, hey, we don't necessarily need a powerful federal government to solve the problems of California and solve the problems of Vermont. So, what am I going to do to get engaged with the community? So those were just some of the thoughts that I had driving back. I know that this isn't quite as information dense as the first one, but these are things that I think, like, hey, if you're thinking about this, like, certainly I'm going to be thinking about all these different things from one, the 30,000 foot view of society, and then two, the, personal level. Like, we've got a lot of time to do stuff. And so, support people, be helpful. And to be honest, like, let's just talk about this. I hope that I'm wrong, but and I don't think it will happen but like, what if we get to a point where unemployment's so bad, the economy's so bad that people, like, violence increases, and everybody is kind of more defensive and more anxious than they are now. Like, what are we going to do to step up and, settle that violence down? Because, I don't think at that point, I don't think, like, the federal government or bringing the military in is going to ease any people's pain. And so, what can we do as an individual and on a personal level to engage with those small communities if it gets that bad? And so these are all things that I've been thinking about. I hope I'm wrong on a lot of them. Like I said, if I'm completely wrong on this, then that's on me, and that's, I'll apologize and say, like, hey, I need to reevaluate the way I'm thinking about things, because obviously in the biggest global moment of my life, if I get things wrong, then that means my intuitions and my thinkings and my thought processes about everything was wrong. And so, those are realities that I might have to live with. So remember, we've got guests coming on real soon. I don't know how much more you just want to see me talking, but, thank you so much for tuning in. The biggest thing I want to say is, like, hey, let's share the podcast. Let's share these sorts of things. Like, invite people to watch different things like that. Like, I love the response I've gotten so far. It's, some people reach out to me that I haven't talked to in years. And for me, like, that just warms my heart, because, not even just because of, like, what I'm doing and what I'm saying, but just because of, being able to connect with somebody on that level that I haven't talked with in so many years. I'm so happy for that. So thank you guys so much for the engagement you've given me. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. Let's keep growing and building these things. And it's always going to be free. It's always going to be there and available and things like that. And so, I'm going to give you guys some of the best interviews that I can with a wide range of people. And so look for those coming in the next couple of days. Thank you so much. I just wanted to give you some of my rambling ideas at the moment right now. And so, that's where we are. And hopefully, we see some better days soon, but, prepare for 6 to 8 weeks of, stuff that could be rough. So thank you so much. And last thing I'll say is, where you want to be, if you're that kind of like me, where you're on that edge of, like, where do I want to be if it's worst case scenario and you feel compelled to go back somewhere, you've got to do it now. You've got to do it now. I don't know what's going to happen, but, could they stop airline travel? Could they stop interstate travel? I don't think they would, but they could. And that's the thing you got to realize is, like, if we go on some sort of nationwide lockdown, which I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it could happen. Just think about where you want to be and make that decision now, because I would say your time to travel around the country is limited. A couple of days, maybe a week at best. I hope I'm wrong. Again, I keep saying I hope I'm wrong, but just thank you so much for watching. Got more stuff on the way. Just wanted to get my thoughts out. Like I said, this is just a lot of it's just for me to figure stuff out. So keep on listening, keep on sharing, keep on engaging. Please reach out to me again and again and again. I love it. And even if you disagree with everything that I'm saying, please reach out. I want to talk about it. All right. Enjoy the rest of your quarantined Thursday and Friday, and look for some guests on the way soon. Thank you.